Hi there, you're listening to Sailing Beyond Knowledge Radio's first Google Hangout live broadcast. Woohoo! And we're here to kind of breathe new life into Sailing Beyond Knowledge Radio, which has been previously over on Podomatic, which is not a free podcast service. So I'm looking for something a bit more dynamic right now, and to get lots of people involved in live discussion and debates on different issues that Sailing Beyond Knowledge has been participating in before. We have interviewed so many interesting and amazing people on the show, from free energy scientists to experts on sustainability and other really fascinating people who are mainly pioneers in alternative and repressed sciences, which have solutions to a better world, to the environmental crisis that we are currently living in. So this is where we are now, and at the moment, because this is the first show, I am waiting for people to turn up, but everything seems to have been a little delayed and confused. Some people are busy. But, hold on a minute. I think we have somebody here. How great. Hello. Is
Hi,
that
Carlita.
Tony? Oh,
hello.
Fantastic. We've got our very... Yes, I can hear you.
Great.
We've got our very first guest on our Hangout, on our Sailing Beyond Knowledge Radio has now moved to Google Hangouts. We used to be a podcast on Podomatic. So Tony is a good friend of mine. He's in one of my social networks, and I always really appreciate some of the posts he puts on his Facebook page. I know right now, Tony, you're with us recording from Iceland. Is that right?
Yeah, I certainly am. It's absolutely stunning up here. I'm up right up north in the West Fjords, which is about as close to Greenland as you could get.
Oh wow! Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm staying on the most isolated farm in the country here, so it's pretty wild up here. Probably.
This is fantastic, because we're like on opposite ends of the globe right now. I'm on the equator in the tropical coastal area of Ecuador, and you're up there in the freezing cold, right?
Yeah, I know. I'll do you a swap, yeah?
Yeah, so I'm glad you came. I invited you, and I thought it would be a great time to talk about some of the different issues that have come up recently. And I know we've shared a lot as well, and we have very similar outlooks, but we also have different ones too.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you've ever actually listened to any of my podcasts on Sailing Beyond Knowledge. Oh, I think you had actually.
Yeah, I did listen to one. Yeah.
Okay. Well, you kind of get the gist of what we focus on. We're sort of looking at different alternatives to the mainstream repressed sciences, free energy, and any kind of repressed technologies. Is the main focus here, and sustainable alternatives and just solutions to the current problems that we're facing with the environmental crisis right now. But today, we can talk about anything you want. So if there's anything that you particularly want to focus on, let me know.
Yeah. Well, for me, I always want to try and get to the root of the problem. I guess as a lot of people do. But I see a lot of people looking at certain political parties or certain different different ways, and I feel like that's just sort of papering over the cracks. I feel like the reason that we're in so much trouble at the moment is because people en masse are acting immoral and working against natural law, and I really feel it's as simple as that. And unless people sort of consciously wake up, as it were, and start acting in a more moral way and coming from a place of sort of higher self rather than lower ego self, and start looking at the whole rather than just the self, I think that we will continue to suffer. So for me, it's still about trying to get people to realise that we are under mass mind control, and have been for thousands of years, and really just trying to sort of raise the consciousness of the planet. I was involved with a couple of solutions, but I realised that if people aren't going to change their ways in how they live, then really we're just papering over the cracks, because I think that we are being pushed to evolve the way we live our lives. So any talk of sort of new financial systems or what have you, I really feel is just sort of papering over the cracks.
Yeah, I absolutely agree there. We're definitely being kept in a kind of false sense of stasis, and with that, as you say, any kind of moves that some of us make to these alternatives to kind of build bridges between these two paradigms. It's a very difficult time because lots of us are in the middle. We're floundering for ways to break away from the main system. Those of us that are aware of what's going on, and then also, I mean, as you say, there's so many people that are just still very distractive and steeped in the main system, but at the same time, those of us that are trying to create more awareness, need to focus on the solutions, because we don't really have time to keep focusing on what the elite are doing, and with their psyops or this or that, for example, and we're both from England, and lately, especially the end of last year, I was very distracted by some of the news regarding, MPs and paedophilia and child abuse. But all of that is just still part of the distraction. And, if we get too sucked into it, we're going to miss the opportunity and the precious time. We really don't have a lot of time, in my opinion, anyway, because being an environmental scientist, I'm really aware of the cruciality of the environmental crisis at the moment, and this is why I agree with you. We really are in a very, very crucial time, and most people don't realise it, but we are actually living in one of the 6 greatest mass extinctions at the moment. All our key ecosystems are under threat, and yet nobody's doing anything about it, because and those of us that are being either imprisoned or murdered or persecuted in some way, because now the military are protecting and the police are protecting corporate interests rather than the interests of the people. And then, as you know, our freedom of speech is being impeded as well. It's like everything, all of our rights to protect the earth, our rights to speak freely, our rights to healthy food, is all being affected. Sorry, there's a truck going past.
Latin America, it always sounds crazy, but no, you're right. It's like walking a tightrope, isn't it? We've got one foot in looking to the future and looking at new solutions, and the other foot is still trying to get more people on our side, and enhance the consciousness of the planet. And you're fighting a very brave battle down there. I know from your emails and when we've spoken, there's a lot of corruption, and it's very dangerous where you are at the moment, from what you tell me. And big respect to you for being over there and fighting that battle. And more people need to go over it, or more people need to do that. And certainly when I come over there, I'd definitely be interested in looking at what's going on down there. But yeah, it's, I mean, we talking of solutions, and the biggest solution for me is we've got to stop acting immoral. I think the more immoral we've become as a society, the more our rights have been taken away from us. And I really feel that is in line with natural law. We're almost getting our comeuppance for acting in such selfish, careless, ignorant manner. And once we start acting more morally towards each other and more morally to the world, towards the earth, then I like to think that the wheels will turn, and we will start, these solutions will start naturally manifesting themselves, and we'll have the universe more on our side, looking at sort of deeper terms. But absolutely, we do need to keep looking at alternatives as well. And as you...
Oh yeah, sorry, I was just turning up the volume for you, and I'd lost you for a sec. Can you repeat what you just said? Sorry.
What point did you cut? What? Oh, okay. I was just saying, as activists, we've got our heads turned in so many directions. It's really is a balancing act. So, I mean, I'm looking up here. A good friend of mine that I'm up here with. We're looking at the whole Earthship idea. Where I am at the moment, there's lots of land, and potentially looking at those sort of solutions off grid. But I still, not everyone is going to want to move off grid. So it might be a solution for a few, but it's certainly not going to be a solution for people that are more interested how Lucy got killed on EastEnders or whatever happened.
That's right.
So it's got to be a much wider increase of raising of consciousness, and some people will only do that when it gets so bad and they get so affected personally by it.
Well, that's definitely the way it's looking. But I mean, when you say people need to be more morally conscious, I think that's only really, I mean, for me personally, I think that's only really going to happen when people realize that they need to start looking within themselves, because, you know, I see all these current deformations and injustices are a result of human consciousness seeing itself separate from everything, from the natural world, from one another. It's only until we begin to see ourselves as deeply connected to the earth and one another will we all start treating each other with more respect.
Oh, is that another truck? Hello?
Yeah, I'm just going to mute myself every time the truck goes past.
Yeah, that was. Are you doing this call on the motorway or something?
No, I don't even live on a main road. I live on the outskirts of a tropical forest, and these trucks that go
Oh,
past are water trucks. They're transporting water to different people, and they're
yeah,
very loud.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Um, so yeah, I mean, I guess all we can only do what we can do, I guess, Carlita, and that's put information out, do things like this, put these podcasts. Yeah, there's only so much an individual can do. I mean, I was involved with something last year where it involved potentially uniting the people, uniting the country, and all I got was a load of abuse, accusations of being a shill, and in the end, I just washed my hand of it because I thought, well, the people don't want it. I'm not going to waste my time with it. So I just went back to doing my own thing. And in actual fact, it wasn't a bad thing because it made me sort of really look deeper and realise that something like that really is papering over the cracks. And even people within the so-called truth movement or alternative media, I still feel like a lot of them don't really want solutions. That they don't. I had it last night where people were, all they could do was put down stuff that I was doing, and it's like, well, what are you doing then? And what you get back is silence.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
even it's just immaturity all round. You've got people living
Yes,
in ignorance who are acting immature, and even the people that are so-called
craving to be
aware and
awake
awake
and
of
aware.
things.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean,
even
I think that's where you and I have really a lot to talk about, because just like you, I was part of a movement that claimed to be very conscious and all for sustainability, and it was founded by some rock star, and it has about 250,000 followers, and we were invited to be ecological consultants. And as
yeah,
it turns out, we found out that they were planning on developing their so-called conscious cities in pristine rainforest in Peru
mm,
and in Costa Rica. But the fact is that that they should be developing wasteland instead of cutting down pristine rainforest. Oh, hold on a
yeah.
minute. We have another wonderful guest here. This is
Okay,
Johana Sand, who's also a very good friend of mine. She currently is also in Ecuador, and
okay.
she's been a speaker on consciousness for a very long time now. So she can add another edge to this, because Tony and I were just talking about how people need to be more respectful of one another, and aware, that we're all connected, and the fact that we're currently behaving as if we're separate from nature and each other is causing some of these, deformations and injustices that we're seeing. But anyway, Joanna, I want you to just start by saying hi and where you're from and what you're doing here in Ecuador.
All right. Well, hello, Carlita. And sorry I'm late, but some circumstances, were unavoidable this morning. So nice to see you online. I
Nice to
saw you not too
see
long
you.
ago. Yes, I've been in Ecuador off and on. I've been coming here for about 15 years. And initially came here because of some friends and working in the jungle with some plant teachers and so forth. But I've been settled in Cuenca for about 3 years now. And as you know, my focus, for many years and continues to be, is shift in consciousness. I think many of us are seeing our real problems can only be resolved with a shift in awareness about, as you say, our interconnectedness and our ability to live in communion, not in opposition with, with everything. That's nature, that's aspects of our life, that's how we how we perceive reality. So to me, that's the essential core base of transformation, and then being inspired to do what we can, or what we're passionate about, to serve humanity, serve the earth, to serve things that seem out of alignment. So that's essentially, as you know, my focus. I've kind of been a synthesizer of the Enlightenment traditions. My whole life, I feel there's so much opportunity now to really deepen our awareness, where in the past it might have taken us many, many, many years to come into certain realizations that I feel many of us can do in a much so-called shorter time now. I think that's the real positive aspect of what's happening through technology and so forth. So is that a good enough introduction for the moment?
That's fantastic. Yeah.
I continue to do groups here in Ecuador and the U.S. in pointing us to that aspect of ourself that is free and unlimited, because we are all connected with that, and it's our, I feel, evolution and our responsibility to wake up to that aspect of ourself first in order to be able to live it. So that's been the major focus of my work.
Yeah, actually, I wanted Tony to meet you, Johana, because at some point he is planning a trip to South America this year, and I wanted to introduce you to him because you've been doing these workshops on consciousness for a long time now. Can you tell me a little bit about the work that you did in the States, because you had some consciousness workshops there, or a school on consciousness? Is that right?
I mean, pretty much my adult life, like many of us, I saw early on, I think in my early 20s, that reality is perception. I felt it became clear to me through different experiences that I went through that one could see reality in very different ways. You could have two or many more people in the same so-called experience, and they would be seeing very different things. So that intrigued me to the point where I used many, certainly in the early days, psychedelics, and then Eastern thought. And, like many of us, I had some awakenings where my reality shifted quite dramatically. And I was very enthusiastic about that transforming my own life and being able to share that with other people. So for many years, I had a school for consciousness in Los Angeles. And then I did a lot of traveling, certainly did other things in my life, but it's been a theme. It's been a pretty much a theme again of my entire life, and now that I'm able to not be focused on other things, raising a family and so forth, I feel it's an opportune time to deepen what I've certainly been focused on my whole life, and this seems to be true. I've always had this intuition that this time, so-called, even though we know time is an illusion at some level, but there seems to be a coming together of energies now that allows many of us to really deeply embody what we always suspected and known at a maybe more surface level about who we really are as infinite energy. And this is not a belief system. This is something that has to be realized with oneself. You can start out as a conceptualization of this, but certainly it's beyond intellectual understanding, and it's as we know, it's a deep theme. So it's something one has to experience in one's life and live it.
Okay, so what would you advise for somebody who's really just beginning on such a journey, who has just kind of started to awaken up, and they don't really know where to go. They're overwhelmed by everything that they've learned, you know, from the corruption in mainstream society to the environmental crisis and all of that. What would your advice be for somebody who's feeling overwhelmed and
Right.
a little depressed, you know, regarding the situation in the world? Because, you know, some of us here are trying to build solutions. You know, Tony is one of those people, you're one of those people. We've all got something to contribute to help bridge the area where some people find themselves, which is no man's land, and they're completely overwhelmed. They don't know where to go from here. What would your advice be?
Okay, I mean, I think first of all, everybody has a different journey. We got to realize that, as everybody has a unique way of expressing themselves. And I think the key, as I touched on, and you and I have talked about this, and hello, Tony. I'm assuming you've looked at this as well. It's the, it's the
Hi.
aspect of. I sense, as much as we can to put our own house in order. In other words, how can we really serve, energetically what we call what we perceive to be outside of ourselves, like, the problems of the world, or I don't care if it's government, ecology, or relationship, in one's so-called personal life. It comes down to the same energy of how do we serve in our own capacity without getting, as you call, de-energized or feeling victimized by the conditions that we perceive that seem overwhelmingly negative. And I think that the Enlightenment traditions have always pointed to the same understanding. There's different levels of consciousness, and the level of consciousness that we perceive most of our challenges in this so-called third dimensional reality, which is very predicated by good and evil and right and wrong. And this is, we can only clearly look at what we call the world out there to see, a lot of disillusioning aspects of this. But I think the first step is to say, is to at least trust that there's different levels of consciousness, and we can see things differently from whatever level we happen to be residing in. So my always advice to anybody, if they're in a state of disillusionment or suffering over what they perceive to be wrong, is to, if they're ready, is to search or find ways of contacting a deeper source within themselves, that they'll be able to look at things from a different angle. And there's many ways to do that, and I don't know if I can belabor that, as we all know, but certainly finding people or a situation that will guide them into questioning how they're seeing reality, because we're capable, and I feel this has been my focus of, when we're connected in a deeper way, we're connected to infinite energy, which allows us to be able to deal with things in our life in a much more energized way than if we're seeing it from mainly our ego mind, which certainly creates a separation. In other words, we perceive we're separate from what we see, and much more at the effect, and have very little power. So the question was, what would you recommend to people? And I would say, if someone's ready to use whatever circumstances in their life that can point them to see things in a different way. There's lots and lots of support for that. I mean, I think there's more awakened beings right now on the planet than there ever have been. And certainly with technology, a lot of those people and processes and tools are available, you know, to all of us. It's just a question of what you're ready to hear and what you're ready to question. Because to wake up to ourself involves a real shift in perception, and it involves giving up a lot of what we hold to be our absolute beliefs. And that's not easy for anybody, you know. So it's just a question of you know, how much we're ready for that shift. And I tend to see that is a natural occurrence, you know, just it's a flowering of humanity. And it happens sort of organically in the right time, in the right situation. Just like we all know that when we're in the flow of energy, things happen in a way that's a lot more efficient and energizing to us than when we're in fear or anxiety and trying to control things. You know, don't we? You agree with that, I know, Carlita. So that's how I see it. It's really dependent on where we are in our consciousness. I think how much effect we can have in our lives. You know, how much power we really have to transform things. So does that make sense?
I have another. Yeah, I mean, I'm asking you questions for prospective listeners, really.
Sure.
I have another question here, which is, you know, a pretty much basic question for people who are very new to the subject of consciousness. Can you explain in your terms what consciousness is? What do you mean when you talk about consciousness?
Okay.
And also connecting to...
That's a good question. Well, I think that...
Sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, and also what source is to you? What source is to you?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, and I'll try to, I know terminology and semantics is certainly can be an issue. And I tend to use the word consciousness or awareness in terms of, you know, pretty simply what I'm going to digress here for a moment because I've just a few months ago was at the Science and Non-Duality Conference in San Francisco, and I was with a number of you know, physicists and quantum physicists and science people from all over the world that are looking at this, that are really looking at consciousness and the understanding of quantum physics and so forth, and how that is shifting our paradigm. And the word consciousness I'm using in place of, it can be interrelated to the presence of energy that's unchanging, that all of us, if we're able to, can access within ourselves, because we're able to realize if we really inquire and look into what changes in our experience and what doesn't change. And what I refer to as consciousness is that presence that's always been here. Even if we look in the so-called past or if we project into the future, it's always represented in a presence or awareness that has been here, you know. It's a presence that has always been here, and it's a sense of that presence is out of time and space. And what I find very exciting now is that science itself is pointing to this understanding that only mystics have held for thousands of years. So I think it's a really interesting paradigm shift right now. So what I'm referring to as consciousness is that spaciousness and presence that we all have access to. Maybe we're not some of us are not as aware of it because we're focusing more on the content of consciousness, meaning attaching our identities to our thoughts, to our beliefs, to our ideas about what we are, who we are as a person, and being in a state where we perceive reality as separate from who we are. And by coming into consciousness or realizing consciousness, not just conceptually or intellectually, as we realize consciousness, we begin to come into that state where we do see everything is connected for real, experiential.
Okay. I'd like Tony to have the opportunity to ask you any questions if he has, or just share his personal insights.
Yeah, I mean,
Hi, Tony.
there's not. Yeah, hi, Johana. Really, really interesting to listen to you there, and certainly I'd love to meet up with you when I come down to South America and have a chat, because you've explained that really well. I mean, for me, consciousness, it's distinguishing what is true and what is not true. Is how I see consciousness. I think there's looking at what people can do when they start to awaken. I would say, just adding on to what Johana has said there, is that although when you first wake up there's quite a lot of negativity around, the actual positives from actually waking up and you know, realizing what you truly are and realizing how powerful that you actually are and how much of an effect you can make on the world, they far, far, far outweigh, for me anyway, the negativity going on in the world. Because once you feel empowered, you can then try and do something about it. And more and more people now are reaching that stage, as Johana said, and there's more and more people waking up each day, and it really is. It's going to be an interesting couple of years, and yeah, there's not really much more I can add as to what she's already said there. But for me, I just see consciousness as sort of really being able to tell what is true and what is not true, and realizing that yes, we are all connected. We're all you know, if one person suffers, then I suffer, and just living from the heart, really.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Tony. That's beautiful. I mean, the ever, you know, I see, just to add on to that, you know, this ever deepening sense of self, you know, as you said, what is true, and some of the teaching, you know, the teaching that's really stood out for me, when, as Tony mentioned, what's true, what is true is that never changes, you know, and if we're really honest, we can look at the spaciousness that we are and that we arise from never changes. And the deepening of that allows us to function as what we see as evil or negativity that from our ego mind appears outside of us, or we feel at the effect of. From the deepening realization of consciousness, one sees that it is not outside of it. It is just a trigger, in a sense, for us to include through a deepening realization, and that's love, you know, as Tony mentioned, from the heart. It allows us to shine light of awareness on everything, and that's what transforms it from a very deep place, because the mind only, you know, the what I call the ego mind center, which is not bad or wrong, it's just that we've been identified with that center as humanity, you know, for that's been our default identity, and that's created the world as we know it, you know. So the understanding of the awakening, which is to move from that paradigm, you know, is the paradigm of a separate self into a realized self, is what's up for us. Now, I mean, one can take this into an even more radical sense, and this is what science, I was kind of shocked again when I was with some of my scientist acquaintances and somewhat personal friends, that the real conundrum of science right now is that what they're seeing is there's no out there. In other words, what we perceive as time and space is very much an illusion, and things are happening in a parallel, parallel reality.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely. Can I just say something before you continue?
sure.
From our previous discussions, what has been really interesting to me is the fact that we as human beings and our minds just can't help but compartmentalize time into a linear, perceiving it as a linear passage, whereas when in actuality, with all this new information coming from quantum science, is that we're living in a multitude of parallel worlds and dimensions, where time is actually, it's more of a holographic structure rather than a linear structure that we our brains can only compartmentalize in that way, because we can't, our brains can't really understand the concept of infinity, and that time is really it's something that doesn't exist. It's just a human perception. So going back to what you're saying, which is really exciting, I just wanted to add that, and if you can elaborate.
Well, to me, and thank you, Carlita and Tony, but to me that's why that's exciting, is the application of this paradigm shift. I mean, realize like 400 years ago or 500 years ago, we thought the Earth was flat. We believed that the Earth was the center of the universe. When that paradigm shifted with the church, which of course was very resistant to that shift, it changed everything. And now I think we're on the precipice of a huge paradigm shift that's even greater than that. And what that is what Carlita was talking about, and what I've been sharing, is when we realize that the perceptive mechanism of the human brain is really limited in how it's rather delusional in how it perceives reality. Now, to me, that's very exciting, because it forces us to really live, reality is not what we perceive it to be. And why I find that empowering is that, if we are living in potential, infinite potential, and call it parallel realities. In other words, everything that could happen or has happened is all happening right now. And it's the ability of an awakened human, consciousness, has the power to touch into multiple realities and create things at a different level. And that's how I see us creating reality now. We're not, we've been focused in this very limited field, and as we're awakening, we have the potential to tune into other realities and create from our imagination a world that is as Tony mentioned in Carlita, that we're connected. How do we treat ourselves if we know that we're the same one, right? How do we really live with, a conscious connection to the earth, or what we perceive as this carbon-based reality, even though there's other realities, but right now most of our focus is in this so-called 3D reality. So to me, that's the news, the very practical excitement that I have about our understanding of this paradigm shift, and the fact that time is not linear, and our brain processes things as cause and effect. But in reality, everything is happening now. It's born and it dies, and all these infinite potentials And we are, if we're in that realization of infinite causeless energy, which is more the truth about ourselves, rather than we're these limited little beings that are mortal and are encased in us, that just exacerbates our separateness. So I know this seems a little wide in scope, but to me it's very practical. It's like, because that's all I'm interested in, is a practical application of what's the truth about energy, not what is the limited paradigm that we've been inside of, and how this affects.
I think we need practical right now. We're right in the middle of the crisis. I always say that the environmental crisis is the crisis of human consciousness, and Tony shares that opinion as well, because he's talking from the perspective of human morals. We're just not able to. We've lost our morality. We've lost the ability to feel connected in the Western terms of consciousness, because it's all about me, I rather than community. We've been broken away from that, and we've had all our tools kind of taken away from us voluntarily, to signed up to that by allowing ourselves to be governed by such corrupt forces. But if we tune into consciousness in the way that you say we can, and I've been working on this. It's an everyday dance and practice. But some days are good, some days are difficult, some days are really challenging. And for folk who are really still steeped in the matrix, in society, going to their jobs 9 to 5, working, paying their bills, that kind of thing. What kind of advice can you give them? I'm asking you some challenging questions here, but I'm thinking about people who are new to all of this, and I want to kind of help those people, as well as people who are already on a par with this information.
Well, sure. I mean, I know your passion, for ecology, and I know that's, your connection to the earth and wanting to help, and I honor and respect that. I think, and Tony, you seem to have that focus too, which is beautiful, because I honor what's passionate in us and what we feel directed to do. The part that I focus on is this realization of what we are, because I feel the important part of it is grounding ourselves, embodying ourselves in what is real, and from there, I think it only supports what we feel directed to do as action in our life, whatever particular corner we work in. So you asked me, what is practical? How can someone who's new to this, all I can say is there's plenty of amazing awakened beings out there. I mean, I mean, the people I've been, there's so many. It's again, I would emphasize, what I call a good teacher is a realized teacher who can, you have a sense that they're grounded in the infiniteness of who they are, and it's fairly easy to kind of sense that, but everybody has a different path. Everybody can hear. For as many awakened beings, and I'm sure both of you have your own way of sharing things, there's certainly different tools and there's different techniques, and we have to realize it's not about the tool or the technique. It's really about the deepening understanding of what we are. And I don't know if today's the context to go into that much more deeply, but I would say if anybody's interested, there's people like Eckhart Tolle, there's Byron Katie, there's Adyashanti, there's the science and non-duality folks, there's tons of awakened scientists now. It's just a question. I tend to be drawn to what I call the non-dual approach, and that's a word people have some trouble with, but it really means not two. And it's the basis of all the Enlightenment traditions, starting from the Rig Vedas thousands of years ago, the Veda Vedanta, what I call the postmodern understanding of Ken Wilber and the integral approach. That's another one that's very good. So there's, in the West now, I think, is the cutting edge of consciousness. That's my opinion. I think we have wonderfully awakened teachers all over Europe and the US. It's not the majority of people, but if anybody is interested, there is certainly lots of support. I don't follow one teacher, and I teach myself, but I consider myself a student, always a student and always a teacher, as all of us are, of wherever we are in our process. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I get if somebody's hungry and they're ready to move beyond a certain confined container that they feel is too small for who they are, what they sense they are, they'll generally find a way or a catalyst, as I'm sure both of you have in your life. So I think it's a question of really listening to oneself. And a good tool, I've always emphasized this, that if you feel polarized or victimized by what you call your life in any way, in other words, through a relationship, through being horribly frustrated at what you see in the world and you feel victimized by it. Are we still on? Hello, Carlita? Hello?
Yes.
Oh, hi.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, it just seemed like everything sort of went dead for a while. Okay, so I just feel if you have that sense of frustration, that it's a really good clue for you. It's a good clue, the collective you. If you're feeling, somehow de-energized, that's a real good starting point for self-observation. And that's because if we're polarized against what we call reality, that means that we're basically centered in our ego mind, which is not I don't mean that's a bad thing, I just mean it's a starting point for moving from a ego mind identity into a more being level identity. And so you can question yourself if that's your condition. It's not a bad thing because your life is your curriculum. So it's always being self-aware of what's going on with your own body-mind mechanism that is the biggest clue for us to shift things. So does that make sense? That's, rather than, well, there's this, that, and this, that to go to, it's really just a sense of, if we're capable of being connected to infinite causeless energy and we're feeling depleted by what we're seeing, then we have the possibility of shifting that energy. Okay?
Yeah, it makes sense to me. I'm just asking in terms of thinking about folks who are coming from this from a beginning perspective.
Sure.
I think
can I just add to that, Carlita? I would say
go for it, please.
People that are becoming aware and more conscious. I think that where we're at the moment, people have got to ask themselves, is it right what I'm doing? This is what we were talking about before, in terms of acting more morally. Because I really believe that the reason why there is so much chaos is because people are acting immoral. And I don't know what Johana thinks about the whole concept of natural law, but I really feel that we are, whether we like it or not, we are bound by that. Yes, we have free will, but we have to respect each other and realize that we are all connected with the earth and each other. And if we hurt someone, then there's causal effects for that. So with people waking up, I would say a question to ask themselves is what am I doing? Is it morally right? If you're a serving soldier, is that all right? You're getting a paycheck, but is that morally right doing that job? And these are some of the questions that people want to avoid. They'll do everything to looking themselves in the mirror and checking on how they're acting in the world. So I think we can talk about the more positive aspects, but I really feel like the root cause is that people en masse need to stop doing and need to stop acting immoral against each other and against the world, and start looking at what is going on.
Yeah, well, I agree with you there. I think part of that root cause is, as you say, people being unaware of themselves, but part of that root cause is that we are living as if we are separate from the natural world and each other. And because obviously, a reboot in human consciousness is one of the first parts of that is realizing that we are not separate from the environment, we are not separate from one another. So, as you say, when we hurt others, we hurt ourselves. So that's part of it. It's a really big part of, moral consciousness or moral awareness, and because so many are steeped in the current distractions, it's really challenging for people to become aware of that. And although at the same time, I think as things are speeding up and accelerating, the more repression we're receiving from the elite and the oligarchy on infringing on our rights to be able to have freedom of speech, like whistleblowers and journalists can now be put in prison, environmental activists who are doing anything to protect the environment are also being persecuted. So, everything that we are doing in order externally, in order to create more awareness, is being attacked by these external forces. But at the same time, we need to be aware that they are a part of us and we are a part of them, and it's not them and us. That's what goes back to what Johana is saying, because there's so many of us who are even when we talk about these different scenarios, like we were just before Johana came on, with regard to people who claim to be awake and aware, and they're running these movements, and these movements get corrupted by people who are shills, or in disguise, or they were corrupt from the start out. They're just dangling carrots and preying on people who are seeking solutions rather than looking within. So it all goes back to what I personally think that it goes back to what Johana is saying again. We have to stop seeking outside of ourselves, and what you're saying, Tony, requires inner reflection and questioning, as you say. What am the way I'm living my life, is it true to me? Is it real? Is it genuine? Does it resonate with where I really am at? And it all goes back to what Johana says, which is, it's an inside job.
It's an inside job. Yeah.
And I just want to add too, I think it's very useful for all of us, and this is what I keep looking into, to try to find a simple way to communicate that to people that come into my sphere. It's very useful for self-observation to see, not to judge yourself, but to really see where your actions are stemming from. Are they coming from your ego mind, which always perceives reality as separate, that there is evil outside of us and we're at the effect of everything and we have no power. That's the agenda of the ego mind. It served us for a while and now it's killing us. So then one can be sensitized to the being level of oneself, and it's very useful to know where we're coming from, not in a judgmental way, but for self-observation, because there's very clear criteria, of how energy works, depending on where we can do the same action. For instance, we can start a foundation or do work that is focused from an ego mind center, or we can start an organization that really has beings that are really coming from a more awakened place, and the results will be very different. That's what I've observed over time. As we can look at lots of things in the political world that show that, and as well as the ecology movement and so forth. That's why I think Carlita speaks to the disillusionment of some of the organizations. So how one does that, it's been something I've looked at pretty deeply, and I can tell if for instance, we all suffer from sometimes jealousy or resentment or feelings of, oh, why didn't I get what I want, and so forth. And those are clearly coming from a mechanism within ourselves, and that is capable of being seen through. And to see through it allows us to come from another level of consciousness. It's very simple. I mean, it's not difficult. It's challenging to live this way, but one has to be, I think Tony mentioned, you have to be aware of where is the flow in ourself. And I sense a real capability now of seeing that, which may in the past, so-called past, or another parallel reality. That's what I call the past now. Of seeing, that, yeah, wow, I can see how I was coming from this reality of lack and difficulty and fear, and I see through that more clearly now. And I think that allows what Tony calls a moral imperative, because when we're operating at a being level, and that's our more default place of where action arises from, there's a flow with that. We're sustained internally by that energy, and it really allows us to live in an unconditional, energy, call it love or whatever you want to call it. In other words, we're self-sustained, and we can allow ourselves to be used by this infinite field, that people call the Tao, you call it consciousness, you call it even God if you want, that it's who we are at the substratum. But it's a question of allowing that energy to take us over rather than our own limited field of identity. And humanity is moving out of that, as I see it. I think it's the game here. Now, whatever you want to call this purpose of this life, which probably has as many purposes as it has people individuating. But that to me is what I call the awakening energy. And then from there, I think our actions, because when we're in touch with that, if we can even recall, you realize, wow, you really want the best for everybody. Even the so-called evildoers, ones that we think are corrupting everything. It's just ignorance. It's ignorance, and we cannot like the action, but certainly we have to realize whatever is happening is an aspect of ourself, and it's a mirror. It's really a mirror And when we see in the mirror of what we call the world, we really deeply see that it is, from the place of beingness, just a tool, for deepening the energy. It takes on a very, very different flow.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, just adding to that, I think there are definitely changes energetically coming into this reality, and we are being almost encouraged to change by these universal forces, and it's just a question of how much suffering are we going to go through rather, before we get to the other side. So I think we're heading in the right direction, but it's going to we need more and more people to sort of realize self and to carry on with those energies, and the quicker we can do that, the quicker we'll get to the other side. So I think we're heading in the right direction, but it's down to us how much suffering we want to go through.
Right, and I think suffering is optional now. I really do. And what I mean by optional, I don't mean pain, because pain is part of the human experience in that sense, but the difference between suffering and pain, which I call suffering, is the story that we put on it, that we keep going in the psychological mind. And I think that's optional when we can see, and I mean, Carlita knows, my focus, I say it's an inside job, and I see the best way we can serve everything is to wake up ourselves, because then we can transmit the energy in a way that allows, that we can be the solution for real.
And literally transmitters, because once you wake up to a higher consciousness, you're getting direct access to those energies and literally transmitting them.
Right, exactly.
So.
No, I totally agree, Tony, and I think, to me, this is just what I've learned, what I've seen on the inner realms is that transmission of unconditional energy with the purest aspect of who we are, the source. That's what I call the source. I mean, that is essentially the substratum of all of us. We just have been disconnected out of whatever mythology you want to, attribute that to. It doesn't really matter. It just matters that we're capable of connection now, and that connection gives the human being, a co-creative partnership with reality that I think is possible, and that's very, very exciting for us, and should be very inspirational. I just want to say one more thing. I'm sorry, I'm talking a lot, but the thing that the thing that I always look to is reality on all its levels, and I mean as we're sitting here at our desk or in front of our computer, to remember that our brain processes reality very different than what reality really is. So that right now we're sitting here, not only are we connected to infinite energy just in who we are and everything around us, but the potential parallel realities of past and future and infinite possibilities are all here. And that our focus on this small broadband of what we tune into, it's just like a radio station. You can tune into a certain station, but you can also change the channel. You know what I'm saying? And so if your channel is full of static and full of limitation, you can change the channel, literally change the channel. And so we have, I always find it interesting, and I'm certainly not the reality that we get presented through mainstream media, we all know is a sham. But I also know the conspiratorial theories that a lot of us focus on are also very limited. Yeah. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's not to exchange one set of a limited reality for another set of a limited reality. It's to realize that all of what we perceive is not really the whole picture, because we're incapable at a level of our mind of perceiving reality. So that always is very, what do I call it? It's very inspiring to me, because I see that what I feel frustrated by or limited by is really a channel that I've been tuning into, and in order to even shift what I perceive, I have to tune into something else, which will in fact be the only way I can even affect what I perceive as a negative picture. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's how I'm seeing reality.
Yeah, it's a very, very eloquently put, Johana. I really enjoy listening to you speaking, because the way you articulate it is just brilliant, and it's really good to use the analogy of the radio and broadband and tuning into a different channel. I just want to go back to what Tony said earlier on, and you know, the question of how much suffering will it take, and also what you said regarding, well, you know, now you feel it's a choice, you know, we don't need that. One of the things I just want to add to it is, you know, for me, you know, I'm coming from the place where, you know, I really see everything as part of the path. So, you know, unfortunately, many of us have chosen suffering and trauma in order to awaken. You know, it seems to be the only way that we can wake up is a big slap in the face. And you know, I've personally had a lot of physical challenges and physical pain throughout my whole life, you know, regarding operations and stuff, and you know, some very challenging mental and emotional traumas too, and it's all part of the process of shaping my personal path. And you know, and I find it really
Can you hear me? I think we got cut off.
very aware of this, because we've talked about how some people are approaching especially people in the New Age movement are talking about you know, being positive minded all the time, because only positivity creates your reality, when in fact that's a very aggressive way of denying your humanity and all that is part of the path, all the suffering and all the pain that we experience, and that it's okay. You're allowed to have permission to feel depressed or feel low, because all these are indications to your truer higher self. So if I'd like, you know, Tony first of all, and then you to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, I have this thing with the New Age about not allowed to feel any emotions and all this. It's really ridiculous. I mean, we are human beings, and we have emotions for a reason. And from what I understand, that they are our indicators in life. So, and then we can act upon our emotions. So if you're feeling guilty because you've hurt someone, then your lesson there is not to do that again. And I feel that all this about not feeling anger is good if it's channeled in the right way, because for me to get active and to do things like this radio show and what have you, I had to feel a bit angry about what was going on in the world, and it drove me to really try and effect change. So it really is. I find this New Age is really quite dangerous, because it's getting people to, and the hippies done it in the 70s. Just think peace and love, and everything will be okay. We don't have to lift a finger. Well, I'm sorry, but we're here in physical, which requires real action in the world, and yeah, I just feel like there's a lot of people that are getting drawn into that, and it's sort of distracting us from the real issues at hand, really.
Okay. Can I respond? Are you done?
Yeah.
Tony? Yeah,
Go for it.
I think I agree with you, but I want to clarify some of that. And this is a very, and I'm well aware of different attitudes about within New Age and spiritual, what do you call it, bypassing and all of that. And I want to address it because it's a subtle thing, but it's very important to really see this. In terms of transformation or shifting energy, the first base of understanding is to allow whatever is there to be there. And that includes emotion. It includes whatever is happening in the mind, body, psyche. I just feel the important aspect of it is to be conscious of it, to be aware of what is going on with oneself, because that's the only, to let oneself be as you are. And that includes negative and positive emotions or whatever is arising authentically as a real experience in the body-mind. And that is the first point of entry for transformation. And I say it's the first point of entry for transformation of anything, is to see it with clarity. And that's where we get into being conscious, because you realize there's, in the first steps of awakening, you have to kind of separate the observer from the observed. In reality, there's no difference. But we tend to be totally identified with what's observed than the observer. Does that make sense? So yeah. And that's where the basis of real clear understanding of oneself and one's emotions and allowing them to be there. So I never advocate any kind of bypassing or trying to think positively to negate what's really going on, because that is not an effective transformative technique as we learn, right? No. So the real deal is to be with oneself, but the what I call the enlightened part of it is to start to observe clearly one's emotions, and that allows for transformation of the more what I call negative emotions to really blossom into, as what you call positive action or deepening our understanding of ourself, and allowing us to, you can't get to the clear land of being, and this is Buddhists, authentic Buddhists and Veda Vedantists and so forth know this, can't get to the clear, pure land of our being unless you go through those emotions, those are the doorways. You can't bypass them.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So you have to really see them, but to also hang on to them and make them, try to cling to them as truth is also, not liberating either. So you begin to see that there's nothing in the human experience that has to be negated, because it's all there. Whatever you can perceive as positive or negative already exists. It already is allowed because it's already here. Do you know what I'm saying? And everything that possibly can exist is already here. So to deny them and say they're not here is equally delusional as believing that they're the solid fixed things that are the truth. Yeah. So it's the seeing of that, the being with that, and then allowing ourselves to transform. And transformation is, to me, only means shining the light of awareness on what we perceive as dark and lacking clarity. And transformation is the clarity that comes through when the light is shined on aspects of ourself that are ignorant.
I agree.
So I don't know if that makes sense, but
it's very, very, very nicely explained there.
Yeah, so I agree with you that the new age, there's this sort of bad rap that comes from, oh my God, if you're talking about waking up, you're negating what's going on in the world, and you're letting all the negativity, the ones that talk about solipsism and so forth, and I've really looked into that, and I understand, but it's a very nuanced thing here we're talking about, and to me it's very practical. It's the application of all of this in our own energy field. So I say, look to your own energy field, because that's your guide. That's your guide to, functioning at a moral level, as you call it, or functioning, where are we functioning from?
Yeah.
And allowing ourselves to be transformed and shifting into a being level reality, which is God. I can't see any other solution in terms of, humans moving from the ego mind center of separate conflict, but
all we can do is sow the seeds.
Yeah, and I say, be the solution. I think Carlita had that on here. We really are the solution in ourselves. If we're waking up to our divine nature, then we're co-creators of reality. Right now, we feel we're victims of reality, rather than co-creators of reality. And when we're co-creators of reality, I think that's the excitement. That's the passionate part of what we're about here, and how we can live, and how that'll look in these new communities and groups of people that get together. And like Carlita says, then we can ecologically apply our understanding to the earth and nurture.
Absolutely. It's a process of many, many factors. It's really, everything you're saying, Johana, is extremely valuable. The same with you, Tony.
Hello?
Yeah, I think we got cut off here.
Has she gone?
Yeah.
She did this last time.
Carlita. Okay, there's.
Hello. Oh yeah.
I keep on here.
I keep cutting off because my internet's not working.
Okay.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm getting cut off because my internet's not working, but I come back when it is.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was just saying that I think, but what you're both saying is extremely valuable, and it really is important for us at this time to see that all these factors are part of the solution. We are the solution. It's the cheesiest saying ever, but it's so true. We can't wait for authorities or governments to take us anywhere, or they're only taking us to a place of destruction if we carry on giving up our power to the power and money to a point that they will not stop destroying our planet and killing or threatening those of us that are resisting it. So to be the solution, we have to decide for each of us individually, what action will I take personally? Will I completely devote my time to focusing on developing my inner consciousness and make a balance of practical actions and steps outside of myself as well, because we have to, because we're moving from this paradigm, realizing that we are co-creators, as you say, we have to kind of construct or walk a balance within that. That keep us empowered and for constantly expanding, because that's one of the things that helps bring in that energy that we can co-create with. I know that Johana, you speak about the free energy in terms of having that expansive energy, as well as the free energy that I talk about, which is one of the practical alternative solutions. So yeah, I think that what you're both contributing is really important for people to consider, in terms of we are the solution. So
yeah.
Sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you keep phasing in and out.
Yeah, you're in and out, but I think we got the essence of it.
Yeah.
And well, thank you. This was it was great to meet you, Tony.
You too. Hope to see you at some point.
Yeah. And I just have a final thing, like Carlita asked practically what people can do, and I just have one more thing to add to that. I feel when we are shifting our identity from an ego base to a being level, it helps if it's a priority. If it really is a priority, in as we notice ourselves in our daily life, we find the energy, because it's a self-fulfilling universe, as I see it, that will enable us to make that transition. So it's, again, if we want to learn, it's whatever we really want. If we really want to learn to play piano, we put all our emphasis and energy into playing the piano, and then we'll learn. So it's the same as we're shifting our consciousness. It's like, really, really wanting that and trusting that we'll get the guidance we need to make that shift.
Sure. And I just add as well, it's also just developing that lost principle of care.
Sure.
We've got to want to care enough to not only change ourselves, but also care enough to see what's going on around us. So to develop that principle of care, that lost principle of care, which we don't really have on a mass scale, we need to find that, because once we get that back, then we'll really start to see things shift quite quickly, I think, and that's and that takes everyone to do that.
Great. Carlita, are you still here? I think we lost it with you.
So I guess we should wrap it. Are you there?
Yeah, I keep coming and going again. Yeah, I keep coming and going, so I kind of miss. I kind of.
Hello.
Okay. Well, it feels like we're rather complete.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's just said Carlita's left the call as well. So.
Yeah, I know. She's got her what do you call it? In and out internet here.
Ah, okay.
Well, maybe we can wrap it up. It was great discussion, and I hope it sparks things to come.
Yeah, definitely. Well, lovely to meet you, lovely to speak to you, and you, Carlita, and we'll speak again very soon.
Okay, take care.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.